Thank you very much, Shabbat Shalom. Greetings to you all. Well, we all hope Harvey had an awesome celebration, and I am sure that he did. It was also my good friend Javier's birthday, and I'm sure he celebrated and enjoyed that amazing full moon the other day. There were times I felt like I was driving right into that gorgeous orange orb. Now I'm going to jump right into this parsha, my friends. It has a few fascinating, simply fascinating events. But deep down, it's about gathering up the people for the commencement of the journey. And running through it, you will notice there is a chain of puns. And this chain encompasses the story of Moses' anguish complaint and the appointment of the 70 elders to share his load, along with the story of Aaron and Miriam's rebellion. Now, the first word is the extremely unusual and uncertain term, asufsuf, meaning a gathered mass. Classically, it's translated as a mixed multitude, but a better descriptive term is riffraff, because that is the nature of the word. Now, through 14 variations on the root letters, we are brought from the crisis that is generated by the gathered mass to resolution, when in Numbers 12:15, Miriam is gathered back. Hey Asef Miriam, for the journey about to begin. Bechalotcha, when you set up the lamps. The 7 lamps shall shed light opposite the front of the menorah. Say that 7 times. There you go, friends. We immediately know what this parsha is named for. These instructions were about setting up the lamps, otherwise known as the menorah, with its 7 lights. That by itself would make a fantastic topic made from one piece of gold. And like the tree of life, takes you through various paths in your journey through enlightenment, with its 7 branches and lamps representing the 7 days of creation and the 7 planets of the solar system. With their nighttime illumination and their influence on our nature and personality, each of us unique, each of us different. And other than the Ark of the Covenant, the menorah is probably the most famous symbol of biblical Judaism and helps define a people to this day. You know that it would be untrue. You know that I would be a liar if I was to say to you that we couldn't get much higher. Try to set the night on fire. This lamp was to be lit every night, and it has been, and continues to be, and continues to burn in our homes, in our houses of worship, in our hearts. And while being told to keep it lit, we get our first insight into a real division of priestly labor. But where and how did this come about? Well, it began but a year ago. For mine is every firstborn among the Israelites, in man and in beast. On the day I struck down every firstborn in the land of Egypt, I consecrated them to me, and I took the Levites instead of every firstborn among the Israelites. This, my friends, was the deal that God had made a year earlier, at the first halting, or Passover, when he took all firstborns, but he exchanged the firstborn of Israel for the Levites. We are packing to leave Sinai. The assignment of who does what has been handed down, and there is a new and distinct priestly pecking order and a technology to deal with original impurity. Now, the dangerous inner zone of the sanctuary can be entered only when a person has undergone an elaborate sequence of acts to rid himself of the impurity that is intrinsic to profane life. Thus, the Levites must be sprinkled with expiation water, have their body hair shaven, their garments washed, and a special sacrifice intended to remove even inadvertent offense offered up for them. This is the first clear indication of a hierarchical division of cultic labor between the Aaronite priests, the Kohanim, and the Levites, who actually serve them and do the heavy lifting in the sanctuary, in contrast to officiating in the ritual. That is why still to this day in a synagogue there is a distinction, and you may be asked if you are Kohanim, Levite, or Israelite. Now, some scholars believe this division is actually from the time of King Josiah, which would be around 620 before the Common Era, and of course that tells when this part of the Torah would have to have been written. And just like different creation and different flood stories are blended as one, different ages of Levite service point to different authors putting together the priestly section, which furthers the image of the Levites as a phalanx protecting the tabernacle and its holy accoutrements. It is talked of in military terms, my friends, for they are seen as the army of the Lord. And as the journey begins, two of the most significant events take place back to back. Events that had such a profound effect, they are both still observed, approximately 3,500 years later. We are witness to the first post-Exodus Passover. And the Lord spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai in the second year of their going out from the land of Egypt in the first month, saying, "Let the Israelites do the Passover offering at its fixed time, on the 14th day in this month at twilight. And you shall do it at its fixed time. According to all its statutes and according to all its laws, you shall do it." There you go. And this was the first of the post-Exodus Passovers, and it's been going on for 3,500 years approximately. Now, people have a hard time following the timeline, partly because they're reading about things belonging to a major society with laws, with ritual, with great wealth and population. But friends, it is but 1 year after the Exodus, and this is the first observance of Passover. And at the same time, in its observance and for all other issues, we are given what many have seen as the most important law of all, the law grounded in fairness, decency, dignity, and honor. One statute shall you have, both for the stranger and for the native of the land. There shall be no distinctions, my friends. Everybody is to be treated the same. And on the day the tabernacle was set up, the cloud covered the tabernacle of the tent of the covenant, and in the evening it would be over the tabernacle like a semblance of fire until morning. Thus it would be perpetually. The cloud would cover it, and a semblance of fire at night. And as the cloud lifted from the tent, then the Israelites would jump onward and journey. And in the place where the cloud would abide, there would the Israelites camp. The lamp, the fire, it still burns in the Ner Tamid, the eternal flame. And the cloud returns in the annual gathering of the festival of Sukkot. And friends, there's a fantastic symmetry here with Passover. The first Passover was celebrated just before the Israelites set out on their journey from Egypt. Now, they are about to move onward from the Sinai encampment in the wilderness journey, and again the departure is marked by the Passover offering. It is the partaking in the Passover sacrifice that forms the primary act of affirming membership in the community of Israel. You see, there was no formal ceremony of conversion, as in later times or as today. All that was required was partaking in the Passover offering, and to do so, the stranger must be circumcised. This was a very different type of religion. It was a religion founded on faith. You say, "I'll let you down." It's not like that. If you're so hurt, why then don't you show it? You say you've lost your faith, but that's not where it's at. You have no faith to lose, and you know it. Until this point, narrative has been abandoned for tabulation. We've had census and military roster numbers and legislation in a long stasis in the wilderness of Sinai. Now the Israelites prepare to move on, and their order of march is dictated by the descent upon the tabernacle and the ascent from the tabernacle of the divine cloud. The indication of the varying time periods during which the cloud abides, tents, dwells over the tabernacle, the Mishkan, may seem, repetitious, but in fact, it constitutes a grand rhetorical flourish. All of Israel's movements through the wilderness are prompted by a divine sign, with the duration of encampment varying from a night or two to a month to a year. Now, friends, the Torah says, whether 2 days or a month or a year, when the cloud would extend long over the tabernacle to tent over it, the children of Israel would camp and would not travel, and when it was lifted, they would travel. Can you imagine waiting for the cloud to decide when to move, how long to stay? That was faith. Now, the great scholar Abraham Joshua Heschel pointed out that now religion has become religion. It has become dogmatic, ritualistic, institutionalized. He wanted to see a return to real faith based on awe. Awe was the revelation at Sinai. Judaism has as a principal tenet the concept of the Sinai revelation, but now we are practicing a counterfeit religion. There can be no substitute for faith, no alternative for revelation, no surrogate for commitment. And as the people who are witnesses to God's only mass appearance begin the greatest journey of all time, We read in Numbers 11:1, and the people became complainers of evil in the ears of the Lord. Complaint after complaint. And this is where we see that term riffraff. And the riffraff that was in their midst felt a craving. And the Israelites too again wept and said, who will feed us meat? We remember the fish we used to eat in Egypt for free. The cucumbers and the melons and the leeks and the onions and the garlic. And now our throats are dry. There is nothing save manna before our eyes. Well, you can't satisfy some people for free. This term is a striking instance of selective memory. The people were like grumblers. And this is just the first of many accounts of their complaining. And interestingly, it's the only one in which the reason for their dissatisfaction is not told. Now, the people appeal to Moses rather than to God. And Moses continues to act as intercessor. And they still turn to the human leader rather than directly to the mysterious, invisible, divine source that they have evidence of every day. So much for faith. What ends up happening is they cause God to grumble and complain as he gets ready to wipe them all out and begin again with Moses. And Moses, we see, is also a complainer. He complains that he has to bear the burden of the people alone. And this is in explicit contrast to the report about Jethro's advice to Moses in Exodus, in which Jethro tells him to pick judges to help him with the weight of his task, that they'll bear it with him. Now, Moses takes Jethro's advice there and appoints judges to help him. So why does he say now that he is carrying the burden alone? He still complains now to God that God has left too much to him. That makes you want to say, enough already. Just as you think you've heard it all. We have Miriam and Aaron complain about Moses' Cushite wife. Now, the great biblical theme of sibling rivalry, until now, has been absent from the story of Moses, Aaron, and Miriam. But here, it makes one hell of an appearance. What was interesting, my friends, was the phrase, the Cushite wife. Is this Zipporah? We all know about Moses' wife, Zipporah. She was a Midianite. This is actually something that's not talked about too much. Now, generally, Cush is a designation for Nubia or Ethiopia, which would make this wife, Moses' second wife, black. Now, if she is a second wife, the objection might be simply to the fact that Moses had compromised Zipporah's privileged status by his second marriage, or could reflect racial disapproval. Now, again, these are people who had more than one wife, so I don't think it was the first case. And I think that it's about the racial disapproval because Miriam is blanched as snow in this. Most translations still say leprosy, but we know that leprosy was skin blanching. And the Mosaic prayer, God, please heal her, please, that he says is the shortest prayer in the Torah, a mere 5 words and 5 syllables, bereft of any metaphorical elaboration or explanation of motive or circumstances. Think of the karma of it. If the Cushite woman is actually black, this sudden draining of pigmentation would be acerbic poetic justice for Miriam's slander, and we would have a very powerful biblical statement regarding racism. And friends, what you should also note is that the purpose of this and other things was not to punish, but to foster the program of regathering. And the people did not journey onward until Miriam was gathered back in. And it was in the second year, in the second month, on the 20th of the month, that the cloud was lifted from over the tabernacle of the testimony. The people have been regathered. The march is on. Now, in our society today, religion has become not just dull, but for many, irrelevant, social, and bland. Once it was something felt in the genetic core of everyone, which is why the emphasis was so strongly placed on the need for freedom and faith, and having that sense of wonder or awe. Our personal wants and desires have caused us to lose sight of the real values that count. We have to fight to return to a point where the capital T truth is more important than our individual desires. Friends, the Bible does not begin with man. It begins with God creating heaven and earth. It began with each of us seeing what was out there, which is different from what's in here in our needs and wants. We're converting ends into needs, and our moral compass has strayed. The thunderous voice at Sinai gave spirit, and That is something that we have disconnected ourselves from. People are crazy and times are strange. I'm locked in tight. I'm out of range. I used to care. But things have changed. It is about our disconnection from passion. Biblical man was passionate. The prophets were passionate. They had anger and intolerance, and they felt with passion. They were an intense breed, and intensity is a byproduct of feeling our emotions. We have drifted too far from understanding our emotions and our emotional states. Religion has lost sight of the person and become an impersonal affair or an institutional loyalty, which survives on activity and not commitment. It is the social aspect. It has become what is seen publicly and not what is practiced privately, while its chief virtue has become social affiliation rather than conviction. And to very many, it is still seen that way today. Is it any wonder that many have commented that religion without a soul is akin to man without a heart? Now, how do we overcome this? How do we change all these years of indoctrination and the socialization of religion? By returning to freedom. Freedom is the liberation from tyranny of the self-centered ego. Our egos get in the way of so much. The most commanding idea in Judaism is that freedom is the source of all being. The revelation at Sinai was not about the Lord telling the assembled that he'd created heaven and earth, but he was the Lord who delivered them from bondage. And while we continue to celebrate that physical freedom to this day on the 15th of Nisan, the real meaning behind it is that we always have the ability to free ourselves from that which imprisons us physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. That is one of the reasons we are told to do only one thing on that day every year, to gather for a festive meal and tell the story of freedom. Each challenge for each person is unique, but that uniqueness is what helps foster that engaging of spirit, which is what makes freedom a spiritual event. And in being free, we must stretch beyond ourselves. We've trivialized worship and lost the ability to simply learn. In learning, we are following a religious commandment, and by learning, we are being absorbed in the wonder or awe of God's creation, which is all around us. We must perform out of freedom. We must be aware, we must be capable of repentance, so we must understand that service to God is an essential part of life. And we have to know that all men can achieve this, that all men can have that sense of wonder, which will reinstall awe and faith. To restore religion to what it was, we need to have faith again. But faith in God cannot be forced onto man. Only through our capacity to reconnect to reverence and awe can we get faith back. Awe is the beginning and gateway of faith. The wilderness generation was born in awe and journeyed by faith. And friends, we have those two traits inculcated in our souls. The world is sacred, and so is everything in it. Express your gratitude. Friends, light a candle, make a wish. Celebrate your life and the lives of those you love. Live free, be free, and honor your freedom. Be well, be happy, be blessed. Share and honor the light and all who live in the light, and continue to shine. Continue to send everyone you know goodwill and love. Pray for peace and freedom for everyone, and end to terror and hatred. You can't stop us on the road to freedom. You can't keep us because our eyes can see. Men with insight, men in granite, knights in armor, bent on chivalry. Thank you all. Love you. See you all next time. Wishes do come true. Thanks for joining me. Bless you all. Shabbat Shalom.